everybody, welcome back to the Claremont Classic Garage. Today we're going to work on our 1948 8N. We're going to get the cooling system installed, tie up a bunch of loose ends, and see if we can get this thing cranked up. First thing we have to do is fix up our radiator. I already did a couple of repairs on this when we first got this tractor back last year and we got it started. So I know it holds water and it works fine. The only real issue is this piece of side frame has come off it. So I've just wire brushed around a little bit. We're going to put a ratchet strap around it to pull that back together, and we'll solder it up. We'll wait for this to cool off and release the strap and hope that it's stuck. When this stuff gets old and rusty like this, it's really hard without doing a whole hog cleaning job on it to get the stuff to stick. Yes, I took a shortcut, but I think we're okay. Now we can install the radiator. It bolts up from the bottom here, and it sits on these two rubber pads that are just insulators. You can buy these cheap enough from any of the places that sell tractor parts, or if you happen to have some old rubber kicking around like we did, you can just make your own. The bolts from underneath, when you run them up just snug. You don't have to really reef them. You need to let this rubber do its job, you know. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the upper radiator hose to position the angle of the radiator. And you just want to get it so it's kind of, the core is parallel with the fan blade, like that. On these end tractors, the thermostat goes inside the upper radiator hose. This is an interesting one. It's a bimetal spring. I've tested it in a bucket of hot water and it works. It opens, so we'll just put it right back in. Once we got those tightened up, we just put a heavy zip tie around there, nice and tight, to keep the thermostat from migrating up the hose. Then we're going to make sure our two drain valves are closed. That one's closed, and we'll put the coolant in it and see what happens. Well, it's full up to about there, which is pretty much about where you wanted. You want to keep the top of the core covered, and we're up to there. Once it warms up, if it finds it's got too much in it, it'll spit a little bit out the overflow. That's pretty normal, but we're just going to keep an eye on it now. I've made a kind of a note of where it is, and we'll come back later and make sure it's not running out all over the place or going in the oil pan or someplace else bad we don't want it going. We'll throw a pan underneath it for overnight just to be safe. We had a tiny bit of coolant wicking out of this manifold stud here. So I just tightened it up a tiny bit, and that seems to have stopped it. Everything else looks good. There's nothing in the pan. The level in the radiator stayed exactly where it was, so that means we're not filling the cylinders or the oil pan. Now we can go ahead and put some motor oil in it. I usually put 15W40 diesel oil in these things, but I've had this jug of 20W50 Castrol GTX kicking around here for years. Made in Canada. You gotta love that. And we're gonna use that. And something I like there, look, it says superior sludge protection, which is really good in an old engine like this that doesn't have a positive crankcase ventilation system. And then when we're done putting the oil in the engine, just leave the jug sitting like that for half an hour. I keep my oil cans, my little squirt cans, filled up for free around here with the dregs from all these oil jugs that usually just goes in the garbage. That 5-liter jug of 20W50 was a liter short. I guess this thing takes 6. So lucky I had a miscellaneous liter of 20W50 kicking around, so we topped it up with that. Double check our hydraulic oil level. Yep, that's good. We've got our little remote fuel can attached here. And I put a little bit of fuel in it, just enough to fill the carburetor. And we'll see if it starts. It's the moment of truth. Well, here we go. So put the battery on. It's in neutral. Give her some throttle. Put the ignition on. Give her some choke. Let's see what happens. Well, that's no good. We got to check for spark. All right, let's try it now. I dosed it with a bit of this, and it started. So it sat for a minute. We'll see if it'll start back up. Oh. Charging. It has oil pressure, not great, but it has oil pressure. And the rad leaks. Yippee! I put some stop leak in it, and we'll let it warm and run up and see if that stops our leak. Who knows, it might. In the meantime, we're going to engage the PTO. There, you can hear it, and we're going to see if our lift works. Okay, so we engage the PTO. We'll make sure the shaft is turning and it's not leaking. Good, the shaft is turning, it's not leaking. Even though, if you remember, I wrecked the new PTO seal and we had to put the old one back in. Turn these lights off. Okay, let's see. All right, we're in position control. And up it goes. Put it back down. Sometimes they need a little help to go down. Now we'll try it in draft control. And up she goes. Perfect. And it's not smoking or nothing, so maybe we got a good one here, boys and girls. The engine's warming up. You can feel the radiator hose is warm. Top of the radiator is warm. So the thermostat's open and the coolant is circulating. That's all good. Our exhaust manifold repair seems to be holding up well too. So So what we're going to do now, it's all warmed up and it's running good. It's just about out of gas. Once it runs out of gas, I'll shut it off. We have to retorque the cylinder head. I want to retorque this manifold, and I need to adjust the governor linkage because it's not slowing down enough to curb idle. You can see here we've also got one cylinder head stud wicking up some coolant. We'll fix that too. There it is. She just ran out of gas and shut off. So we'll kill the ignition, open the battery, and we can do our couple of little jobs here. All right, now that we've had it running and it's good and hot, we're going to give it a compression test and make sure this is all good. So battery on, but ignition off, throttle wide open, and you let her pop 6 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Something like that. 105. Let's check number 2. 100. Number 3. 105. Now number 4, and if you remember when we started this project, this was the one that gave us the trouble. It had stuck rings, which I broke taking them off, and I had to re-ring the one cylinder. The bore was pretty pitted up. And I think the best compression we could ever get out of this cylinder before was 65 or 70. I'd have to go back and look at the video and check for sure. But let's see what we've got now. That didn't sound too good. 95. You know what? That's a great improvement over what it was before. And it's basically you want them all within kind of 10% of each other. And we've got that, right? We've got everything is between 95 and 105. So that's pretty good. And that'll make a well-balanced running engine. So we can put the plugs back in and button that up. It's springtime and the cyclists are back out again. And the boys, well... Oh, do you guys see bicycles? They just want to play. They love everybody. So what we need to remember is on number 4 here, the rings are not broken or seated in yet. It's going to take doing some work and some cylinder pressure to get that accomplished. Like taking the thing out for a drive and lugging it around a little bit in 3rd gear. That'll make some cylinder pressure and get those rings seated in nicely. Now we're going to retorque the head, 60 foot-pounds. And if you find the odd one, like this one here under the spark plug tube that you can't get at, don't sweat it. Just grab a nice long wrench and give it a good reef. And then do the rest of them in order, working out from the center like we normally do. Retorquing the head is pretty important. I mean, most of these turned pretty much 180 degrees. So that's how much that once it gets some heat in it, the composition head gasket scrunches down. A steel shim head gasket, you're not going to get that much scrunch when you warm it up. And I don't think you'd find much movement at all on the bolts if you retorqued it. Now I'm going to get and just make sure these manifold bolts are all snugged up. Now we're going to adjust the governor, and you do that by adjusting this long rod that goes from the governor lever down there to the lever on the governor. So this, the quadrant, all the way to the wide open position. Now we're going to put one end of this on the governor, and we'll make our adjustment at the other end. How you make the adjustment is you pull this lever until it hits its stop, which you can see is down there. You pull the lever till it hits the stop and then adjust the rod so that it just goes over the ball. And you can see here, I've got this end out pretty much as far as I dare, and it's still a little bit short. So we're going to take it off and lengthen it a little bit at that end. I already tried moving that end and it's kind of seized. So we're going to have to warm it up or something and see if we can get that end moving. Another little trick, if you find you're running out of adjustment on the rod, you can loosen the nut that holds the lever onto the bottom of the throttle shaft here. And even though it's indexed, you could still get a little bit of movement out of it. Like this one, I had to loosen it and turn it toward closed a little bit just to get, so I had enough adjustment on the rod. But now you can see it's all good. When it's at wide open throttle, the lever is against the stop and you can still push it all the way to idle. And that is going to solve our problem. I bet you it won't even idle now. I bet you it'll stall. We'll probably have to open up the idle speed screw a little bit. But we'll worry about that next time we've got it running. Now, I see since I retorqued the head, I've still got a little coolant coming out of here. So we're going to take that nut off, put a little sealer on the thread, and torque it back down. And I'm not sure. That one, I don't think it's really leaking anymore. We'll see. I'll keep an eye on it. I'll do the same treatment to that if it seems like it's still leaking. Last thing we're going to do today is get the air filter cup filled up with oil and put the air intake pipe just to make sure nothing goes in the carburetor. I'm very happy that carburetor worked because usually this is the carburetor that came on this thing and it was really, really bad. And I'll usually try them on something that I know runs before I put them on what I'm trying to get running. But it all worked out. It's good. And another thing I'd like to point out after, I don't know if you can see that, my purple fingernail. This thing should have a fan shroud on it. I didn't put one on because I just don't have one, unfortunately. It doesn't really need it to stay cool. They're fine to run without it. But just a word of caution, if yours doesn't have one, watch your fingers when it's running. So there we are. Nice. It's actually overfilled a tiny bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch, but that won't hurt anything. And up it goes. And these little cam locks hold it on. Whoops. There. Now we'll get our air intake pipe ready. So here's our new air intake pipe, and we're not off to a good start. We've got two choices of what we can do here. We can either shorten it up a bit here, or we can put a ding in it there to clear that clamp. And I'm kind of inclined to just get the pipe cutter out and take a 1/2 inch off the end of it, and that'll be all we need. Got our big pipe cutter out here, and we'll just take a hunk off the end of this thing. I mean, it might not necessarily be the pipe's fault. All of these things, these old castings, every single one of them is a little bit different. And on the next tractor, this thing might fit with no modification at all. But it doesn't fit on this one. Now you can see it fits in there nicely. All right, we're ready to put this thing on the tractor now. And you can see here the pipe. Look at the size, how much the hose stretches to go on the pipe. I don't usually put clamps on this side. I just put clamps on that side. Got it on. It's always a little bit tricky. One of these little things is actually a big help. One of these days I'm going to experiment and get some car radiator hoses and see if I could replace this first leg, I mean down to here, with a piece of radiator hose. You can't get too close to the exhaust manifold. Some later Ford tractors had this. This is just one hose, all one piece, because the manifold isn't near it. On this one, we can't do that. We need the metal pipe. But anyway, there you have it. That's it for this one. In the next video, we're going to get the back wheels fixed up and get them put on. one of them needs a whole bunch of work. It's going to be quite a project, but it's worth it to save an original wheel because the replacement ones just don't look right. And then, yeah, so we'll get those wheels fixed up, get them put on. We'll get the hood put on, the fuel tank hooked up to the carburetor. We'll just give it a fast once over, put it on the ground. We'll have to torque up the axle nuts, make sure the wheels are torqued, and we can get this thing fired up and get it out of here. That should be a fun day. Anyway, until then, I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Thank you in advance for coming back to watch more videos here. And until we meet again, this is Kevin checking out from the Claremont Classic Garage. So long for now.